You're listening to Inside the Village, where all news is local and no topic is off limits.
So help me, Bob, it's bully in the alley. Hey, bully in the alley. So help me, Bob.
Back for another episode of Inside the Village for the week of October the 18th, 2023. I'm Scott Sexsmith alongside Michael Friscolanti, editor-in-chief here at Village Media. As always, Derek Turner at the helm and the controls again this week in the executive producer role. How is everybody doing?
Doing great, Scott. I just noticed this thing sitting beside me. Do you know what this is?
That's our teleprompter remote. It's a remote.
Oh, doesn't work for you? There's no mute button? All right. You should keep this. I shouldn't be touching any of the technical devices.
Don't touch my stuff.
That's yours.
Before we get into things, I understand that Village Media headquarters, where we are situated, is going to be the set of a movie next week.
Really?
You guys read that note?
No.
Harlan Williams.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Canadian actor.
Yeah.
Half-Baked, Derek, is that the big one?
That's the one.
They're looking for extras.
You want to hear a funny story about newsroom movies?
I'd love to.
When I was at the National Post, they used to film movies all the time at our Don Mills headquarters because we didn't publish Sundays, so Saturdays was off. One of my wife's favorite old movies is Serendipity. It's a romantic comedy with John Cusack.
Yeah.
The New York Times scenes are filmed in the National Post building, like right beside where my desk was.
Really? And
our mailbox is in the background. And every time, it's a 22-year-old movie now or something.
Wow.
And every time she watches it, I showed my son the other day. I said, "That's where I used to work." He's like, "No, it wasn't. You didn't work at the New York Times."
It's Hollywood, son.
I know. That was funny.
That's exciting. Anyway, they're looking for extras.
Oh, are you gonna sign up?
You know what? I applied.
You did?
I did.
Yeah,
I thought, you know what? That'll be fun.
So what would you type away?
Well, they're looking for people to sit at their desk and pretend like they're working. Hello.
You said yourself. Nobody pretends they're working better than you.
I said to Derek, we do that 5 days a week.
Oh
and we'll get paid again.
Oh, boy.
Anyway, so I sent it in.
Jeff, you listening to this?
No, he doesn't watch the show. I sent it in. Turns out they're looking for people between 18 and 40s. So.
Oh. You're too young?
Yeah, well, I wish. Very short. They just crushed my dreams. My acting dreams crushed.
It's okay, buddy.
Yeah.
There's just community theater.
Yeah, you know what? We've got this. Doesn't get better than that.
A lot of acting that goes on.
There is. If people only knew. All right, let's get to the first word to Frisco. Safe consumption site in Sudbury. The clock is ticking. No update yet on the funding, and at the end of this year, they're set to close.
Yeah, our timing was ended up being good with that episode we did with Amber Fritz from The Spot in Sudbury, because right after that episode, the provincial government, as the Trillium reported, that they've announced pretty much a whole sweeping review of safe consumption sites in Ontario. There was a shooting outside one in Toronto in the summertime. An innocent bystander was killed. And so they're reviewing safe consumption sites, and it's kind of put everything on hold. So the Spot in Sudbury, which we remember was waiting for provincial funding approval by the end of the year, and if they didn't get it, they'd have to close. They're up in the air. Timmins is in the same position. They haven't yet applied for provincial funding, but their city funding is supposed to run out at the end of the year. Here in Sault Ste. Marie, you wonder if it's ever going to happen now, because the mayor and other city officials here have been working hard on getting an application in to have a provincial supervised consumption site. But if they're not even going to fund the one that exists in Sudbury, how are they going to build a new one here? So a lot of things up in the air. They actually have a countdown clock on the website for The Spot, right? And Jenny LaMotta, reporter Sudbury.com, is following this closely. So I don't know. I hope that there's some kind of resolution, but the reality could be that on New Year's Day, they shut the doors. Yeah.
All right. We'll follow that one as we have been for some time now. Okay, to Sault Ste. Marie, and a story by David Helwig, and it appears as though the return of the Theveldman Brothers has occurred.
The Theveldman Brothers, right? I think a lot of people have heard of these guys. They've been involved in lots of different projects around the province. The BMI Group is their company. They've had some interesting business ventures here in Sault Ste. Marie. They haven't always worked out. And a big scoop from David about how they're now looking at developing a piece of property across from a new plaza here. But for me, it's just a great example of the local journalism we do every week every day on our sites, because this is a downtown development is a big issue in a lot of communities, including the Soo, and David's bringing a big scoop to the table about how they could be redeveloping a piece of property that's right in the heart of the city, and these guys who are pretty well known in town could be the guys doing it. lots of questions, but lots of interest.
And finally, to Aurelia and Aurelia Matters and reporter Greg McGrath Gowdy on just a heartbreaking story, the story of Dav Langstroth, who next week will die by MAID, which of course is medical assistance in dying. Just a heartbreaking read.
It is a heartbreaking story, and for our readers in Aurelia and pretty much across the chain, we've read about this gentleman. He's been bedridden in a nursing home for a few years now, and he's chronicled his difficulties with the home he's living in. Basically, like I said, bedridden, not able to move. And Greg's update talks about how he's now going to be getting medically assisted dying at the end of the month, I believe, or next week.
October 26th.
October 26th. And it's a sad story. And what's sad for me is that he's actually asking someone else to pick up his legacy for the rights of people who are in long-term care and making sure that the conditions are good. I guess, and it always just kind of triggers that debate about medically assisted dying, right?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people have strong opinions on it, but it's happening in the country now, and there's lots of rules in place around it. But every time you hear about it, it's still one of those things.
Yeah, it certainly is. Okay, today on the program, Steve Paikin. We'll get to that in a sec. But before we do, I woke up the other morning to a brand new email from my friend Michael Friscolani in my inbox, talking about the state of local journalism and the work that we're doing here.
Yeah, we talk about it every week in this segment, but just in general about the work we're doing. And I basically just wrote a note to all the people who subscribe to our newsletters, just reminding them that we're here because of them. They support us. They read our work. They share our work. And, there's been a lot of bad news lately in local journalism in Ontario, right? Metroland getting into creditor protection, wiping out hundreds of jobs. More than 70 community newspapers stopped printing last month. And people have reached out to us and said, are you among these papers? Some people still think we're the newspaper, right? Are you affected by this? And what we're basically just wanting to get a message across to our readers that no, we're not. We're doing exceptionally well. We have reporters on the ground in all our communities covering the stories that matter most, the ones right in our neighborhoods. And it's because of them. It's because they're reading us and they're supporting the work we do. And, as I make clear in the email, we're competitive journalists, right? We care about getting the scoops. We care about reporting quicker and better than our competition, but we would never relish in the fact that another news organization is going down or that they're closing shop. And so we definitely wouldn't celebrate news like this, but it was a good opportunity for us to remind people that we're here and we're as strong as ever, and we're going to keep doing the work we do.
All right, good stuff. TV Ontario has been on strike now for about 2 months, and the flagship current affairs program on that network, The Agenda, hosted by Steve Paikin. Steve will be the guest today on Inside the Village. And earlier this week, we announced a bit of a partnership with Mr. Paikin.
Yeah, you talk about the exciting things we're doing here. Village Media, Trillium, our Queen's Park website that just does fantastic work in covering provincial politics here in Ontario. Steve's going to come on as a guest columnist for us now, for the once-a-week columnist, while the strike is going on at TVO. And it's super exciting because he's such a prominent voice in Ontario politics. He's well-respected across the board. He can explain things that are complicated in a way to everyday viewers and everyday readers in a way that a lot of people can't do. So he's certainly a voice that people look to, especially when it comes to what's happening in the province, whatever the issue is that the politicians are talking about. So it's great for us to be able to have him, and it's great, I think, hopefully he'll say the same thing. It's great for him to be able to have a place to share his opinions going forward.
Yeah, it'll be good to have him and a great chat. We'll talk about the strike. Might even talk a little baseball because, of course, Steve is a big Red Sox fan. You're a Tigers fan. Derek and I are Jays fans. You're a Jays fan? Oh, yeah. Of course.
We should just talk about that.
We'll do a whole podcast just on baseball.
Two-part.
That's right. Steve Paikin joins us next when Inside the Village returns right after this.
Reporters, editors, and journalists who go the extra mile to get the story and get it right. Go behind the scenes with those who cover the stories that matter most to you and your community. Look for it in the Village Features section of your favorite Village Media website across Ontario.
Welcome back to Inside the Village. I'm Scott Sexsmith alongside Michael Friscolani, editor-in-chief here at Village Media. Very excited to have on the line with us the latest contributor to Village Media and the Trillium staff, Steve Paikin. Steve, welcome to Inside the Village. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you guys today.
Okay, so no secret, TVO's been on strike now for almost 2 months. You're a member of the bargaining unit there. How does it look? Where do things stand? What can you tell us?
Unfortunately, it doesn't look great at all. And I wish I had better news, both for the people who are working at TVO or were working at TVO and for the viewers who are missing having us on the air. The thing has been going on, as you point out, Scott, for 2 months, the work stoppage, and there are no talks happening and there are no talks planned. So I'm not sure where that puts us right now, but it certainly is not encouraging.
Steve, what are the main sticking points here in the discussions you have had?
Frisco, there's nothing unique at all about this work stoppage. It's about money and it's about working conditions. And it is the same thing that I think has bedeviled companies all over North America who have seen their employees deal with inflation rates that have been at 5, 6, and 7%. Just a little quick history here. I won't get deep into the weeds, but over the past decade at TVO, money has been tight. Governments have encouraged, or I wouldn't say encouraged, how about legislated, mandated compensation agreements that have called for 0% wage increases, 1% wage increases, and it's been that way for a decade. And when the last contract for the unit I'm in expired, the employees simply made a decision. They said, we can't settle for zeros and ones anymore. We got to do a little better than that. We got to get something that at least starts with a 4. And management, which is its right, disagrees and doesn't want to offer that much. So you got a situation where you got employees who want to do a little bit better, and you got the company that doesn't want to quite do that well. And it's a standoff, and that's where we are.
Excuse the dumb question, but I think a lot of people don't understand. And who are you actually negotiating with? Who runs TVO?
That's not a dumb question at all. That is actually one of the key questions in this whole thing, which is to say, obviously, there is management at TVO that ostensibly the union is negotiating with. Mm-hmm. But given that the government of Ontario is our chief shareholder and presumably, ultimately has the say in what goes and what doesn't go, we're not sure who's actually calling the shots. We're not sure if management actually is negotiating on the other side of the table, or if they're taking their marching orders from the government of Ontario, and therefore it's a better question than you thought it was.
That's a rarity.
And Steve, it's the Ministry of Education that TVO falls under?
That's right.
And so what are you hearing from viewers, from people that tuned into your show all the time? What kind of feedback are you getting? What are people saying to you?
Well, I'll be very direct about it. I get everything from, didn't even know you guys were on strike, because the fact is that TVO is playing reruns of the agenda. They're playing some programs. We've been on the air for 17 years, so there's lots to choose from. And, thousands of programs in the archives that they can just post up right now. Everything from that to TVO, if you think you're ever going to get another contribution out of us, you better settle this thing, because we're not happy that there's no first-run programming again. So that's, it's thankfully more of the latter than the former.
Mm-hmm. How difficult has this been for you personally, Steve, and also for all your colleagues there? I mean, we do this job, we're doing this kind of journalism every day. You're obsessed with it. You go to bed thinking about it. And now it's been 2 months since you've been able to work where you normally do. What's that been like for everybody?
Okay. I've been in this business 41 years, and I've never been on strike, and I've never had a work stoppage. I've worked for 41 straight years, and when I come back from vacation for 41 straight years, I am ready to get back in the saddle and do my job. And it has been, I guess personally, a bit passing strange to come back from my vacation over the summer and not have a job to go to. So that is odd. Strangely enough, my calendar is still very full. I'm not quite sure how that's happened, but the calendar is still very full. The people I really feel for here, Michael, are the people who are on the picket line every day, who are in their 20s and 30s, and who are just starting out in journalism. And this was their first real, their first really good gig. Mm-hmm. And they were looking forward to either a career in journalism or a career at TVO. And at the moment, that career is on hold. And, it's funny, I went to, my wife and I went out for dinner the other night with our daughter, and I bumped into one of the producers who's in her mid-20s. And she was a contract employee. You remember I said earlier, it's partly about wages and partly about working conditions. And one of the working condition issues is we want people who are on contract. In other words, don't have a staff job, but they are on contract. We would like them to have a path to becoming a staff employee, as opposed to just coming back on, gig work contracts over and over and over. We would like that to be able to happen if it can. And, she and I had this kind of quasi-tearful conversation about the fact that this is really her first job in media, and she's really looking forward to being able to have a good go, and her contract is on the verge of expiring, and she doesn't know if she'll have a place to go back. Anyway, it's all very complicated and very sad, and I'd love to get this resolved for her. I'd love her to be able to go back to work and do what we all love to do so much.
Steve, if you can break it down, why should people care? Why is the public broadcaster in Ontario such a critical resource?
I'm going to give you a bit of a strange answer to that, Scott, and that is, I don't think anybody who doesn't care ought to care. There's a lot of things in this world to care about. And as we look overseas in the Middle East right now, there are much bigger fish to fry in this world right now than the lot of 74 people who can't come to a contract agreement with their employer. So I'm actually not urging anybody to care who doesn't want to care. But I will add this. I think TVO does play, and has played for 53 years, a critical and central role in the history of the province of Ontario. I think it's one of the things that makes living in the province of Ontario nice, if I can put it that way. I think it produces really good programming that helps add to the population being a little smarter than they were before they watched our stuff. And I'm sad because I love the company. I've worked there for 31 years. That's more than half TVO's life. I've been there. Mm-hmm. And I'm sad that the place appears to be in as much difficulty as it is right now, because look, I left CBC 31 years ago to go work at TVO because I really liked what they were doing. And I still really liked what we've been doing, and I'd love to get back to doing it. But I understand that everybody's got to feel like they put a little water in their wine, or else this isn't going to end. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to there's so many great things, and so many important things, so many newsworthy things happening in the world today, and I'd love to get back to work so we can talk about them.
For sure. We're going to talk about some of those things, but I guess the last question about TVO, is it just that this government, there's the fear that this government just doesn't care about TVO? It's not a priority for them, that maybe they would rather it not even exist?
I don't want to say that. Look, I've worked at TVO when New Democrats were in power. I've worked at TVO when Liberals were in power. And now I'm working at TVO when Tories are in power. And, we've had good relationships and difficult relationships with all three parties at different times. So I don't want to be, this is not a partisan issue. This is simply an issue about finding some common ground finally, because we need that.
So, Steve, in the meantime, you're doing some other things to keep yourself occupied, including joining our Queen's Park team, the Trillium, as a freelance columnist or contributor. We're obviously excited as hell to have you. What are you excited about?
Well, here's the weird thing. I used to do a column a week for the TVO website. And then, of course, when we went on strike, that stopped. But there's a lot going on in the world. And for whatever reason, I still wanted to write columns. And so I wrote a couple of columns, and I just put them up on my Facebook page. And of course, I'm thankful to have a decent number of people who follow me on Facebook, and the columns really got a significant amount of engagement. And, I think I told your people this a while ago, Scott, when I decided to sign on with you guys, which was, I think when I write things and people comment back to me on them, and we have this engagement online back and forth, I think it makes all of us smarter. I think that whole process of engagement over an issue that is of mutual interest just makes everybody a little more enlightened at the end of the day. At least that's the hope. And I think I was talking to your boss, Jeff Elgie, the other day, and Jeff said, look, I see you're writing these columns. I think we can do a little better than just putting them up on your Facebook page. How'd you like a place to put them that's a little more official than that? And I thought, great, sure. And so during the duration of this work stoppage, I'm happy to be writing my weekly column for the Trillium, which I got to say, I've always liked. Even before I started contributing to it, I read it. It's a really good go-to place for provincial affairs, information, and knowledge, and good columns, good articles. You got talented people running the place, so I'm happy to be affiliated with it for now.
For sure. We're certainly proud of the work they do, and it is great to have you in addition joining them as well, giving that perspective. And again, I've had the same kind of question I asked you already, but what's the reaction been to that? Are you getting some feedback from readers happy to see you at the Trillium?
Absolutely. And I put 2 columns up so far. They both happen to be about the issue that is really overwhelming the world right now, which is the war in the, funnily enough, everything always comes back to Ontario, eh? Everything always comes back to Queen's Park. There's a war in the Middle East, and yet there's a Queen's Park angle to this story.
Yes.
And part of it is because of the reaction of one member of the Ontario legislature in particular, whose initial tweets about what was happening overseas were seen to be quite tone-deaf and ill-timed. I'm talking about Sarah Jama from the NDP. She's a member for Hamilton Centre. And that is a story that just... it just doesn't want to go away. I mean, there has been just a flurry of response to the 2 columns because, as with all stories, there are multiple sides to the stories, but she has come under a significant amount of fire for tweeting something that appeared to, while Israelis were being slaughtered, men, women, children, senior citizens, she put up a post about Free Palestine, and the advisability of doing that, I think, came under a lot of criticism. So much so that she had if I can put it this way, a real come to Jesus moment with the leader of her party. So there's been a lot of feedback to that, and I've had a couple of columns out about that, including, as we sit here taping this today, one that went up earlier today, and lots of good engagement about that.
I read that one this morning too, and it was fascinating because it also gave us a little behind the scenes. You mentioned in the piece about how pretty much every Ontario NDP MPP caught some slack for that. They were hearing about from their constituents about Sarah Jama's comments, and this idea too, which I really appreciated, that for a young MPP, there's some lessons to be learned here, right? This is a team game, as you said in your column. Can you speak to that, Steve?
Sure. And you know what? There's lessons for everybody in this. One of the lessons that I think Sarah Jama may have learned is that this is a team sport. You're not a freelancer. You're not allowed to be a freelancer. You can't just say whatever you want, whenever you want. You're a member of a caucus. You're the member of a party. You got elected in part because you ran on that party's banner, and therefore you are associated with all of the things that the party either wants you to do or doesn't want you to do. You are the disabilities critic for the NDP at Queen's Park, and the leader, Marit Stiles, who has gone to great lengths to make sure that her party cannot be portrayed as a party of anti-Semites or a party that doesn't care about Israel. You're very much offside from that message. So that's part of the difficulty. On the other hand, Sarah Jama is married to a Palestinian. Sarah Jama is 29 years old. Sarah Jama has been in politics for precisely 8 months. So you add all that up, and there's still a huge learning curve for her, obviously. And we know she comes to these issues, as it relates to the Middle East, with a great deal of personal angst and authenticity because of who her partner is. So, none of this is happening in a vacuum. We understand that it's a team sport. We also understand that she feels deeply about this issue. And these are... It's like she's learning how to play the violin in public. There's going to be some very ugly moments, but it's been 2 strikes for her so far, and I'm not sure that her colleagues are going to let her screw up yet again before demanding her ouster if this happens again.
It's that kind of analysis that is great to read on the Trillium. That's as I read that this morning, I was just thinking how great this was to have this alongside the solid reporting that we're doing. It was great. And can our readers expect that, Steve? Are you basically going to think you're going to chime in when the feeling hits, I guess? Or is it going to be every Monday, or is it going to be when you feel like this is what I want to write about?
Well, in fact, I asked your editor, Jessica, about that. I said, you want me on a particular day of the week, or do you want me just want me to file when I feel like it? And she said, oh, no, the latter. You just when the issue moves you, I want to hear from you, and then we'll get you up on the website, and there we go.
So Jessica be getting 2 a.m. phone calls from you. I had a muse. I had to write something.
No. I think if it's going one way, it's probably me bugging her more than she's bugging me.
That's right.
I think it's me saying, "Hey, Jessica, I know you just had me up on the website last Friday, but I got another idea already that you might want to put up, even though it's only Tuesday."
Perfect.
I think that's how this one happened.
Great.
Steve, what's the reaction been to the side gigs that you're doing in the meantime? I know you've got a radio deal that you're working through, and of course the stuff with us. What's the reaction from the union been?
Oh, believe me, I got permission from the union before I did this, and in fact, I don't know about everybody, but I would suggest that the vast majority of members who are on strike right now, have got to have some little side gig happening because, I mean, let's face it, we live in Toronto. It's an incredibly expensive city to live in. And I mean, I am taking neither salary nor strike pay just because I don't think it's a particularly good look for a guy who used to have a 6-figure income to be taking strike pay. So even though I've paid into the union strike fund for many decades, I'm still not taking anything. So yes, I'm trying to keep my quill pen filled with ink by doing something for you guys. I'm doing a little commentary on AM 640, which is a radio station in Toronto. And, it's more for, how do I put it? I'm a great believer in use it or lose it. And I have not hosted an episode of The Agenda since the end of June. Wow. And I really fear getting rusty.
Yep.
That's the reason why I started to write these columns for my Facebook page, even though, it's not really anything official, because, use it or lose it. I don't want to lose my skill of writing. I don't want to lose my skill of broadcasting. And, to be on a picket line or to stay on the sidelines for all this time, I'm really kind of afraid of that. So that's why I'm glad to have these outlets.
Well, you sound great to me, Steve. You sound like you could just jump right back in the chair and be just fine.
It doesn't feel that way. I got to tell you, Michael, it doesn't feel that way. I feel the rust, believe me.
So I guess from the union's perspective, too, when they see you out there doing other things and your colleagues as well, it's a reminder of what the TVO's losing out on, right? That this great program and all the other great program they do is not there anymore.
I think that's accurate, and you guys have been kind enough to put at the bottom of every column, Steve Paikin will be writing columns for the Trillium.ca for as long as the work stoppage at TVO is continuing, and that is there again, that's a reminder to people that it's not business as usual at TVO right now. Mm-hmm. We'd like it to be, but it's not, and, we hope somehow, somewhere, the two sides can get back together again so that we can get this damn thing back on the rails.
But at the moment, you're not feeling very optimistic that that's going to be anytime soon.
No, I'm not.
That's sad to hear. Should we flip to the World Series?
I think we should. We're all baseball fans. Enough doom and gloom talk. Let's talk about what really matters.
Happy.
That's right.
Boston, not a great year this year. Detroit,
fourth last place finish in the last 10 or 15 years. Yeah, I'd say it's a pretty bad year.
Yep. At least Derek and my Jays, played somewhat of a playoff.
Did they really play?
Well,
they didn't really show up at all. Did they get any runs?
Who's your pick to win it all, Steve?
Well, as we speak today, we're at the League Championship Series level. So there's 4 teams left. Boy, the Texas Rangers look awfully good right now. They seem to have a lot of good karma on their side. Mind you, I hasten to remind everybody, the Houston Astros did not play .500 baseball at home this year. So the fact that they lost the first 2 games of the series at home in Houston, I think is not necessarily an indication that they will for sure lose this series. They play much better on the road, and they're about to go up to Arlington to play. So there's that series. The Philadelphia Phillies sure look great in the National League. They're up 1-0 against the Arizona Diamondbacks. And I'm even though there are 3 100-win teams that are not in the playoffs anymore, and how that happened, I'm not quite sure. I do feel confident we got the 4 best teams still playing right now. And the baseball, I mean, if you love baseball, the games have been great. Yeah, and I'm watching them all. So it's been great.
I agree 100% with that. And I'm okay that the 100-team wins were limited. I mean, at some point, you can't just have In the old days, it was 4 teams made the playoffs. I mean, that just didn't work for baseball because a lot of teams were out of it by the middle of the year. And I'm okay that a team with, well, how many wins would the team that upset the 100 win? Would they have 90-something wins, or did some have 80?
Not even 84.
Yeah.
Look at Arizona. Arizona's in there. They're 2 games over 500.
Yeah.
I don't know, Michael. You know what? We need some good disagreement in this conversation, so I'm going to take you on that. Let's get into some spicy conversation here. Baseball is a game that's played every day, okay? And that is the key to baseball. You get on a roll. And if you've won 100 games during the regular season out of 162, that's a real achievement. Your reward for achieving that greatness is to sit on the sidelines for 5 or 6 days and wait for the wild card rounds to finish.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And that is not a privilege. That is a detriment. And one of the reasons I think all those 100-win teams are out now is because they sat on their butts for 5 days waiting for the other series to conclude. They got stale. And as a result, the other teams, which were playing every day, got on a roll. And they're still on a roll.
Yeah.
So I don't like this playoff format. Maybe you need more than 4 teams getting into the playoffs. But I sure don't like these 2 out of 3 series or 3 out of 5 series, which are just too fluky. 4 out of 7, you got a great chance of the best teams actually winning. And I think you want to see the best teams at the end of the day.
Well, that's my answer to it, is let the teams in, but get started right away and just play a longer series. Because we've seen in the past, I know my Tigers, there was a World Series in both 2006 and in 2012. They sat for like 4 or 5 days before the World Series because they won the ALCS so quickly. And they came out terrible. It took them by the time the series by the time it was underway, it was over.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with that. But my thinking is maybe let those teams in. Maybe take 2 away so there's an even amount, and just get right into 4 to 7 like the NHL does.
Yes.
I don't like these 2 out of 3s either. I think they're kind of silly. I preferred the 1-game wild card over the 2 out of 3. Like have a couple of those come in.
Yep.
But at the same time, I mean, every sport has the upset. That's part of the beauty of the game. So you have that number 1 seed go in, and they still lose.
You see it in the NHL.
Yeah, the
all
NHL.
The time. The 8th seed knocks off.
I feel like
the top
every year
seed.
the 8th seed knocks off the top seed, and they all start right at the same time. So
I don't mind if it's every now and then, because that's the definition of an upset. Happens every now and then.
Yeah.
But the regular season's got to count for something.
Right.
You got to be rewarded more effectively for winning 100 games and winning your division. And it's not a reward to sit on your butt for 5 days.
No, 100%.
And wait for the other guys to get hot. That's not fair.
No, I agree with that. So they have to figure out how to deal with that. Maybe we should figure that out. That could be, like we said, another podcast.
Absolutely.
We'll spend a couple hours.
Steve, I want to ask you one Jays question, because I know you live in Toronto and you go to the odd Blue Jays game. Were you surprised by Schneider's move to pull Barrios?
I was not surprised by it, but I was disgusted by it. And the reason is I'm all for analytics. Look, you can't have your head in the sand, and you can't ignore the fact that there are tendencies in baseball which are mathematically proven to be, more likely or less likely to happen. Obviously, you need that information. But there's also something, Scott, in baseball called the eye test.
Yeah.
As in, open your eyes, look at what you're seeing.
Yep.
Analytics may tell you one thing, but Barrios was rolling. He was pitching very well. And the notion that you're going to take a guy pitching against his former team out of the game after only 3+ innings when he's doing so well, and I understand the theory, you wanted to turn over Minnesota's lineup and yada, 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 but it didn't work. And to me, I mean, it was the same thing happened. Kevin Cash, the manager of the Rays, did it several years ago in the World Series, where he took out Blake Snell, who was rolling along, just cruising along, took him out too fast. That backfired as well. I don't know. I just think somehow, somewhere along the way, we have kind of lost respect for the eye test, which is open your eyes and look at what you're watching. And like the game last night, Nathan Eovaldi's pitching, former Red Sox world champion Nathan Eovaldi is pitching for the Texas Rangers, and he gets himself in trouble. And he's in the, whatever it was, 4th or 5th inning, and Houston loads the bases, and there's nobody out. Now, analytics says he's in trouble, go out there and get him out of the game. His manager, who's only won 3 World Series and maybe knows the eye test pretty well, Bruce Bochy, says, no, I think Nate got himself into this trouble. Let's see if he can get himself out of this trouble. Strikeout, ground out, no runs given up. He's a winning pitcher of the game. Texas leads 2-0. The eye test. let's not take all the humanity out of the game, eh?
I agree 100% with that. I think it goes back to your point about the 162-game season. I think analytics helps you get through that grind of the 162-game season. And if you make a call like that in game 90, it's not really going to affect the rest of the team. But in that moment, when you make that call at that critical time, a big playoff game, you just saw the whole team deflate at once when they pulled that pitcher. Like the whole team was like, how can you do this? That's the feeling I got watching that game. And sure enough, they went out and scored 0 runs and nothing happened. So in the end, it didn't really matter.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What did you think about the postseason press conferences, dueling press conferences between the manager who said that was a team decision, and the general manager who said, oh no, that was the manager's decision.
Yeah, I know that.
And the president of the team who batted cleanup there, trying to clean up the mess that the two of them had made.
Yeah, it's terrible. And to be fair, I don't watch Blue Jays press conferences. I have such a deep-seated hatred for the Blue Jays. Even when they're losing, I can't watch their press conference. But yeah, there seemed to be a lot of, it was hard to understand who was taking the heat for that one.
There was clearly a bus and somebody was under it.
But here's the point, too.
Yes,
in the end,
exactly.
It didn't matter that they pulled the pick because they only gave up 2 runs that game. So it ended up being a great baseball move.
Yep.
Was it already 2-0 when he pulled them?
I believe
No. It was nothing.
Okay,
and
but still. But in the end, they scored 2 runs.
They didn't score.
Yeah, they scored 2 runs, right? Which is, if you told me every game that the opposing team's going to score 2 runs, I'd take that every day. So in the end, the move worked, but it didn't work because I think the offense said, "Oh my!" I think it just all their gas went out at that moment. So, I shed no tears for the Blue Jays. I could care less if they win or lose, or if they
were happy.
Yeah.
You were happy when Vladimir Guerrero got picked up.
I was.
Day?
I hate to say it. My bias shows, but it's like I said. It goes back to when you're a little kid, and the Blue Jays. I just couldn't stand. There was a great rivalry between the Tigers and the Jays when I was a kid.
Absolutely,
that was like a real rivalry. We used to play a 3 series at home, 3 series on the road every year. And again, you talk about 1987. That's we came back and won the division. Those were huge moments, right? That I'll never forget. And I could care. The Blue Jays, for me, when Joe Carter hit that home run, I was the only person in Canada not cheering for that.
Heartless, man. You're heartless.
He really is, isn't he?
All right, Steve, we could sit and talk baseball all day, but you got a column to write for Jessica, I'm sure. So we'll let you get at it.
Hopefully it's on the Blue Jays.
That's right. Steve Paikin, contributor for the Trillium. Steve, thanks for doing this today. Appreciate it.
It was lots of fun. Thanks a lot, guys.
For the latest in in-depth features and enterprise journalism from your local writers at Village Media, be sure to check out The Big Read. The Big Read. It's the full story behind the headlines. Look for The Big Read on your favorite Village Media website across Ontario.
Back to wrap on Inside the Village with Michael Friscolanti, Scott Sexsmith, yours truly, and of course Derek Turner. Man, I could sit and talk to Steve Paikin all day. Of course, you may not be able to talk to him, but you can certainly read Steve's work at the Trillium.ca, our Queen's Park publication. So awesome to have him as part of that team.
That's fantastic. Like I said, I was just reading his latest column this morning, and it's just a great compliment to the reporting we do there.
Yeah.
To have his voice, it's a voice that people recognize. It's one they turn to for smart, intelligent analysis of what's going on in provincial politics. So it's awesome to have him there. And just, listening to him talk, it reminds you why he's someone that people turn to. I'm a little torn about it because obviously for Village and for the Trillium, it's a great addition. We're very happy that he's with us. And for as long as this labor stoppage is going on, he's going to be writing for us, which is fantastic. But at the same time, I understand why a lot of people miss TVO and his show in particular.
Absolutely.
It was that, rare place in this world where you can go for, sensible discussions about difficult, complex issues. And whatever it was healthcare, education. He'd have great guests on who knew what they were talking about. And it wasn't just people yelling and screaming at each other. It was a good debate, good discussion. And even hearing him say that he hasn't been on hosting that show since June.
Yeah.
It's a long time, Scott.
It is a long time. And the one thing about TVO, and I never knew their programming lineup, top to bottom, but there were 2 things that I always knew about TVO. I could watch Steve Paikin on the agenda, and for those who have had kids or kids in their lives, that's where you went and watched Arthur.
That's
was
true.
TVO.
Arthur, yeah. Which apparently isn't on anymore, we should have asked him about that.
Is it not on?
I think they pulled it from TVO. I don't want to, don't take my word for it.
Arthur's on strike.
Yeah,
Arthur's on strike.
DW.
DW said, "That's it. I'm out.
That's it. I'm out of here.
Get my agent on the phone." Anyway, great show. Steve Paikin and Arthur.
It was great.
TVO.
So, exactly. So look for Steve at the Trillium and look for him on our podcast at Queen's Park, The Trill.
The Trillium.
That'll be coming soon, and I'm sure he'll join us again to chat about some issues. So we're very excited to have him around.
Absolutely. Check out The Trillium. If you're a political junkie in this province, you have to check it out, thetrillium.ca. Log on, subscribe. You'll absolutely love it. And now you can read Steve Paikin. Okay, time's up. We're out of here. InsideTheVillage.ca. If you'd like to watch any of our back episodes across the Village Media Network, and of course, wherever you get your favorite podcasts, reach out to us too. You want to talk about Steve or anything else? We're all for it. ITV@villagemedia.ca. For Derek Turner, executive producer of the show, Michael Friscolanti, editor-in-chief here at Village Media, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Enjoy what's left of this week. We'll talk to you next week.
You've been listening to Inside the Village.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe, provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.